welcome everyone to another episode of the DSCubed Podcast. Today I'm speaking with Professor Robert Turnbull from the University of Melbourne, a data scientist whose work sits right at the intersection of artificial intelligence, history, and the humanities. He's part of the Melbourne Data Analytics platform, where he helps researchers across disciplines apply machine learning tools to everything from biomedical data to ancient Greek manuscripts. Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here. Just a note. I'm not professor. I'm actually just senior research data specialist.
Oh, okay.
So maybe one day, but not yet.
Okay, that's fine. First I wanted to talk a little bit about your background.
Sure.
Because I think it's very interesting, this interconnection of many fields that you are working with. So I saw your papers are about biology, reading ancient scripts, Bible, and kind of theology, and all of that connected with data science. So if you could please elaborate, how did you get into that? What's your background? What's your story in general?
Really lucky to have been able to work in lots of different fields. So I first studied maths and astrophysics at Monash Uni. Then I got into earth science. Because I was originally wanting to do a PhD in astrophysics, but it turned out that the professor, the astrophysicist I wanted to work with, was too busy at the time. So I thought, what's the closest thing? So I thought I'd go to studying the Earth's crust and mantle. So I did that for a few years at Monash Uni. That was fantastic. That got me into research software engineering. So we were working on software to model the Earth's crust, to model subduction zones and mantle convection and all those sorts of things. So I loved that. And also that's what introduced me to high performance computing. So writing code to work on multiple nodes at once. So that was fantastic. But then I stepped away from that for a while, and then I did some more study. I did a theology degree. So that was when I created some mobile apps. We talked about it a few minutes ago. So I came up with some language learning apps for learning Greek and Hebrew. Those are still out there. I wish I'd had more time to maintain them, but sadly I've just. But I think they're still being used by people around the place. That gave me more experience of different kind of software engineering, designing for different devices, and how to help me think about how to create a design that's going to be most useful for people. But then after that. I went to live in Jordan for a number of years. So I was working for a club for deaf adults. My job was to create some software to help the deaf club be able to dub videos into sign language. So their idea was to, instead of having just a small person on the corner of the screen signing at the same time as a movie or something like that, their idea was to pause the movie, fade it into the background, and then bring the signer full screen so that the signer could tell the story again in sign language. So that means that it would be so the signing is full screen. It's totally a deaf product, made by deaf people, designed for deaf people. And it's exactly how my deaf colleagues were. They would normally watch the movie, they would watch it for a scene, they'd pause it and ask their kids, what's going on here? And then they'd get back into the movie. And they wanted to have that. They wanted to have a signer retell the story that way. And the people I was working with were brilliant. The head of the director of the centre, he was one of the best storytellers I've ever known. Anyway, so so I wrote the software to make all that editing seamless. That was a great experience, but it was during that time that I thought, I'll do a PhD. Since I was living in Jordan, I thought, it was recommended to me, why don't you look in, and I'd already done a theology degree, why don't you combine these things into study Arabic manuscripts? So I thought I went across to Egypt to look at some ancient manuscripts manuscripts translated from Greek into Arabic. And so I spent a few years studying the translation of the New Testament Gospels from Greek into Arabic, trying to do that from a computational side of things. And that's what got me into machine learning. Hadn't done data science before that, so I had to try to teach myself deep learning from looking at a whole bunch of courses on the internet. So I was sort of looking at the ones that were most helpful were Stanford, natural language processing with deep learning, and there were some other MIT courses, the Gilbert-Strang's linear algebra course, and anyway, there's a whole lot of courses that I taught myself while I was doing a PhD, and that's what brought me here. Sorry, it's a bit too long, but
oh, that's great. It's very impressive and very fascinating story.
Sure.
So, would it be right to assume that you are just like fascinated by many things, and basically you just find some new hobby and you pick up on it, and then you get really deep into it?
Well, partly I think that's partly my nature. It's also partly the job that I got coming out of the PhD. So they were at the time. They were forming the Melbourne Data Analytics Platform. The idea of that was to have data scientists collaborate with people from around the university to be able to help all researchers around the university bring to bear sort of high-level computation, high-level data science, all these sorts of things. And so the nature of the job that I had was working with 4 or 5 different projects at a time, working with researchers from across the university in all the different faculties. And so partly it's my natural inclination. I love different problems in different areas. So it's I like having too many problems to work on at once. And then I got thrown into a job where that was the main idea. So it's been great. I've been over the last 5 or so years. I've been worked with researchers from around the university on so many different projects. It could be biology, it could be history, it could be in animal welfare. So many different things. Maybe we can talk about a few of them today.
Yeah, and I remember actually on my first semester at UniMelb, I remember a professor telling me that this is like a new age of science, and basically right now it's required from you, if you're a researcher or a scientist, to be interdisciplinary and basically be able to jump from one discipline to another.
Yeah,
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think when you take on the one hand, you need this sort of deep domain expertise. You need people who are going deep in their areas, being able to understand all the literature, being able to understand all the historical debates on whatever academic field discipline that you're working with. But I think when you can combine that sort of deep level domain knowledge with modern techniques from data science, from high performance computing, from machine learning, or using large language models. If you can take that kind of expertise and marry them together, then that's a way of accelerating knowledge discovery and driving new ways, new methodologies in old disciplines. Not old disciplines, but there's so many new ways to study, to do academic study at the moment, that if you can combine both of these things, if you can combine research software engineering and data science with the traditional academic knowledge, then you can there's so many different new areas that you can things can just explode. And that's what I'm really excited about my job, that we get to work with experts and collaborate. So not everyone can be an expert in everything. It's that's why we need each other. We need to lean on each other's knowledge, lean on each other's expertise, and then together work out the best way forwards in these new areas.
Yeah, I agree with you. So now I started to talk a little bit more about the mix of history and data science.
Yeah, great.
In your research. You mentioned that you studied theology.
Yeah, that's right.
How did you come up with that? Because it seems like you started with astrophysics.
Yeah.
And then you switched up to theology. It's not really common.
Yeah, that's right. I was passionate about the topic. I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to understand the history and development of theology. So I started just one semester, and then I was the first subject was one of the first subjects was history, and I realized, oh my goodness, there's a world of information that I have absolutely no idea about. So I was originally just going to do a 1-year degree, just a diploma, but then I realized at that point I needed to dedicate myself to a full at least 3 years to be able to understand things fully, and then even then I only scratch the surface. So there's so much more that I need to learn. Especially now. So what I'm doing now, when I get to do my own research, that's sort of at the intersection of all these things. So looking at, so I was talking about Arabic manuscripts before. So I'm sort of studying studying the history of the New Testament tradition. So partly that's interesting because it's one of the manuscript traditions where there's so much more data in the New Testament than there is in all these other fields. So I'm also working looking at the manuscript tradition of Livy at the moment with academics here at the university, which is fantastic, but the number of manuscripts is far, far lower. And I think what excites me about the New Testament side of things is because you have so many thousands of, or so many hundreds of manuscripts, depending on which biblical book, or even thousands, you need new ways of being able to manage that kind of size of the data. You really need computational techniques, and that's what I'm excited by, being able to develop new computational techniques to be able to study these manuscript traditions, and then we can apply those techniques also to these smaller traditions like Livy and I've been work with an academic here on the textual tradition of Aristotle and that kind of thing. So I'm hoping that what we learn about from the computational side, applying it to a big data problem like the New Testament, and that can also bring insights in other traditions.
Yeah. It's interesting looking at the history from your standpoint, which is just a large pool of data, basically, because this is what history is. Yeah,
it's huge data, but also, so my tendency is just to think of it in terms of numbers and data. But I also get reminded by my colleagues who know the history but better than me that you can't look at it only in terms of that, from that perspective. You need to be able to understand the historical perspective too. So as an example, one of my PhD students, Jacob, he's working on his PhD student in maths and stats, looking at stochastic processes, and he's applying stochastic processes, birth-death models to manuscript traditions, in particular New Testament. That's where I came in as a supervisor. And we're looking at the distribution of ages across the centuries, and we could see that there's a dip from the 12th century. And anyway, so one of the obvious things that you could see from the distribution of ages, you can see, at this point, it's at this point period in the Byzantine Empire, during the Macedonian dynasty, where you get a lot of a big growth in manuscripts, and from the 4th century when Constantinople was sacked, you can see a decline, and you can visualize it. And so what he's going to do is to you put in these different epochs into his birth-death model, so that at each epoch you can have a different birth rate, different death rate, and then that can model the distribution of it, so we can see the total number of manuscripts at each time, and also see how fast they were reproducing and how fast they were dying off. But you need to be able to understand you need to have the historical insight to be able to look at the data and see, okay, I can't just model it as one continuous birth-death process. I need to be able to divide it up into epochs. So you need that sort of historical background, and that gives you more insights into the data. So you don't want to have just a single perspective on these things.
Yeah.
But that's my tendency. I just look at things in terms of numbers and data, but that's why I need to work with other people.
Yeah, okay. And if you don't mind asking, so is your interest with the New Testament and theology coming from like your religious tradition, or it's just pure curiosity?
Well, it's a bit of both. Like it's important academic discipline just in its own right. It's important historical discipline. So it's as a textual tradition, since it's one of the most abundant that we have, it's important to study in its own right and its influence over the centuries.
Yeah.
And in particular, I'm looking at the Arabic side of things. So my mother's family is from Lebanon, and actually, and she's from a Greek Orthodox aligned church, and so and that's also the same tradition of the manuscripts that I'm looking at from the 9th to the 13th century or so, and I can see as I'm reading the manuscripts, there's some of these manuscripts are copied like just a few hundred meters away from my family's village in Lebanon.
Oh, really?
And it's very likely that, assuming that my family were in Lebanon at that time, that my family would have been going to church, hearing these from this exact translation that I'm studying. So many hundred years ago. So I've got that personal connection. I do come from a faith background. I am Christian, but that you don't have to be Christian to be able to study these things from a historical point of view. But that does mean that I come at it from a particular perspective and interest, and I have a background in these things, and that partly motivates me. But I've many colleagues. Anyway, so it doesn't have to be.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Okay, now I want to pivot to your research paper about detecting and recognizing characters in Greek papyri.
Yeah, great.
So for the audience, so Robert entered the competition for recognizing and detecting characters in Greek papyri, and he actually won.
With a colleague, my friend Evelyn Mannix.
Okay. Yes. And you won the first place with recognition and second in detection, correct?
That's right. That's right. So we won one of them and came second, runner-up in the other one. Okay. It was coming down to the wire because you could see the leaderboard. So everything was the time frame was finishing at 9 a.m. in the morning, Melbourne time, and it was one of the competitions where the leaderboard was public at the time, and there was no limit to the number of submissions. So we made a submission like half an hour before the deadline, and we were number one. We were number one by beating everyone else by quite a lot. And my friend and I, Evelyn and I, were talking. Is there anything we can do in the last minute to try to boost the numbers? And we came up with something right at the last second. We ensembled a couple extra. We thought, why don't we ensemble these different sites? We had previously done an ensemble, but then we increased the ensemble size. We tried it again. It did better on our validation data set. We thought, why don't we uploaded that in the last minute, and we were number one. We beat our high score. And we thought, this is great. We got this in the bag. And then right then, a new competitor came into the leaderboard and just slid there to number one. Anyway, so that's totally irrelevant. But it was dramatic at the time. But it was a fun competition. Yeah, so it was looking at Greek papyri of Homer. I think of the Iliad. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with papyri. Maybe the audience, it'd be good to know about papyri.
Yeah, you can elaborate.
Yeah, so papyrus is a material from. It's a type of. It's like paper, but it's made from papyrus reeds. So you crisscross them, and then press them together, and then you come up with a writing surface. And it's fantastic. It was a cheap way of coming up with a writing surface in the ancient world, but the problem is it's not as durable as other writing surfaces like parchment, which is made of animal skin. So the animal skin manuscripts from the ancient world survive to us fairly well, but often the papyri don't. So we only get papyri surviving. We get them mainly surviving in Egypt.
Yeah. This is like my first, kind of thought about papyri is immediately connected with
exactly.
Egypt.
So partly because that's where the papyrus plant grows, but it's also that's the reason why it's found there. Not just because that's where the plant grew, but also that's the environmental condition where you can where these manuscripts can survive for hundreds and thousands or hundreds of years, even up to the present day. But often they're fragmentary, often they're damaged. So lots of manuscripts they might be found in a garbage dump. They might be there might be tiny little pieces that you need to match together. So we were studying the Oxyrhynchus papyri. So I won't go into the details of that, but there are from what I remember, hundreds of thousands of small fragments that were collected as part of that archaeological dig, and still, I think we only have about 1% of them that are published. Some small number in the paper. I think we talk about it in the introduction. So there's huge numbers. I think they're still sitting in. I might get this wrong, but I think many of them are still in tins. Where they don't open them up, so to preserve them from they were stored in these like cake tins or something like that, and taken from Egypt back to England, and they were and they've been preserved there, and scholars have slowly and methodically worked their way through these papyri, especially the big ones, but there's still so many little small fragments that need to be analysed. And there's a huge. So I hope that if machine learning can be used to be able to to be used as a tool alongside expert papyrologists to be able to work out how can we place these small fragments together? How can we read them? How can we edit the text? And hopefully, machine learning and other computational techniques will be able to speed up the process of getting these important texts edited and made available to the public. So that's part of our motivation for that study and for that competition. And I'm really interested in working out ways to use deep learning models to be able to read these handwritten texts. So partly I'm working on a number of projects at the moment where we're using these kinds of models to be able to speed up the process of extracting text from images like that.
That's very fascinating, and also makes me think how we at university, so I'm doing Bachelor of Science, and we study the ways to collect data and pre-process data, and for us is to just drop null values or delete the outliers, and for you the process of actually collecting and pre-processing those ancient scripts is very complicated and very long, basically.
Well, if you can work out ways to better handle the data. So obviously it's a good first step, just to drop the problematic ones and then see where you are. But the more you can spend time thinking about the data generating process, thinking about what are ways that I can be able to incorporate these more difficult ones. How can I clean the data? And if I can't do that, how can I model the process to be able to use as much information as you can? Because especially from historical sources, you have to be as frugal as you can be, so that you'll be able to make the most of the information that's been preserved to us down the ages. We don't get to choose how much information's been preserved through history, so you've got to make the most of the data that you have.
So for this competition, it was analyzing Homer.
That's right. So we had a bunch of images that were annotated for us. And then there was a test data set where we didn't have the information, and that's so we just had to make predictions and upload them to the server.
Okay.
And
it's out of context, but so according to you, did Homer actually exist? Because
good question. I'm not an expert in Homer, but I'm learning as much about Homer as possible. Partly because I'm working in I'm doing another project working on the Mycenaean language of Linear B. So Linear B was the script used by the Greeks before they used the Greek script that we know now. And so at the time of the Trojan War, the Greek language was an early version of it called Mycenaean, or the people were the Mycenaeans, and you can anyway. I'm trying to learn more about learn more about Homer, learn more about that period of history and that sort of the late Bronze Age, and also leading up to Homer and the Homer hundreds of years later. I was there a single mind behind the Iliad? So obviously it was an oral process. There's the lots of poets added their own interpretation to the text over hundreds of years. So when I read parts, when I read parts of the Iliad, that's anyway. I like to think that there might have been one mind that put a lot of it together, and that was expanded upon over time. Was it the same as the author of the Odyssey? I'd have to leave that to the experts, but I'm guessing maybe not. But I'd leave that to the experts. I'm certainly not a. But you do. I'll leave it there. So otherwise I'll keep admitting my own ignorance.
Okay, that's great. Now if we can, I'd like to move to the actual model that you implemented.
Yes.
So from what I found, it's called YOLO.
That's right.
V8. and it's not you only live once, but you only look once.
That's right.
Correct?
That's right.
So if you could please tell us how this model actually works and what was your kind of like way of designing it and your strategy basically.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so YOLO, there's I came across YOLO. So there was another great series of video lectures I started the work at MDAP. My previous experience had only been in natural language processing. So I came here realizing that I need to, if I'm going to work in all these different fields, not just work in manuscripts and those sorts of things, I need to branch out into computer vision. And so I came across I thought, how can I learn about computer vision? So I thought I'll do the same sort of thing as what I did, find a video course and then get started, then start reading the papers and become more knowledgeable that way. So I think it was Andrew, I forget his name. Anyway, there's a great series of lectures on online. So I think I might look up his name in a little bit. But it was brilliant. And he talked about so many different aspects of the lectures on image classification and then move through to object detection. And one of the models he talked about for object detection, so that's when you have an image and you want to detect detect parts of it and put a bounding box around it. So let's say you've got an image of the road and you want to identify individual cars, and you're just happy to have a bounding box. You're not interested in segmenting the individual pixels. Then one of those models was YOLO. So YOLO people came up with the idea with YOLO is that rather than coming up with a bounding box and then classifying and then working out what's inside the bounding box as two separate models, you do them at the exact same time. So you can cleverly use the convolutional layers to be able to, in a convolutional neural network, to be able to do both at the exact same time. It both speeds up the process and you get better representations of of what's going on in the image because you're using the annotations sort of twice, so the loss is feeding back into both the detection and the classification. That's probably as much detail as what you need to know. That's the idea, is that you using convolutions to do both detecting the bounding box and the coming up with what's going on inside that bounding box at the same time. And that model, that idea, that's the core idea of YOLO, and then that was used. There's lots of different versions. I think we talk about in the paper. There's YOLO 1, 2, 3, and then somebody came up with, I think a different group came up with number 5, and then other people did other ones. So there's a few people, they're using the same technique and coming up with different versions of YOLO, and the one we used was version 8, and now that same group has gone to version 11 now, and I'm using that for a whole bunch of different projects, which it's great. It's great. It's fast. It's very simple to use, and we're coming up with a framework to be able to make that easier for humanities researchers to be able to use for their own projects and that kind of thing. I might be able to talk about that later. So that was phase. That was one part of our solution, but we also used other techniques to be able to fine tune the image classification, which gave us better results for actually doing the classification. So the YOLO was what gave us the bounding box and also one classification. Then we used these other models as well to also be able to take what's inside those bounding boxes and just classify those. And we use some we use SimCLR and also another model which I don't know off the top of my head. That was what Evelyn was responsible for, and it was those ensembling those together, which is what gave us the best result at that time.
DEIT.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I have it written down here.
Yeah, great.
Okay. So these models, are they universal in image detection, or do you think they fit this task very well, specifically this task, but for other tasks maybe they wouldn't be that good?
Yeah, good question. I use YOLO for everything. I use that. So I'm using that for So one of the things we're working on now is we've been working with a herbarium at the university to try to look at trying to extract the information from the herbarium specimen sheets. So we use a YOLO model to take a large image which has the plant specimen and also and on the sheet also has a label which has the handwritten information about what the species is, what the genus, that kind of thing. Also there might be other information. There might be stamps. There might be lots of other database labels. There's all these sorts of things, and we use YOLO to be able to detect those. And then we take the partly because these things are huge in resolutions, we have to sort of lower the resolution, run a YOLO model, be able to find the bounding boxes of all the things that we're interested about, and then we can crop those from the original image so we have them at full res. And then we might use another YOLO model and some of the labels to find different parts of those texts. So I find YOLO in any kind of object detection model. I start with YOLO. There's also Detectron, I think. There's other ones that are off the shelf that are also useful, and other competitors, and we're hoping to have an easy framework to be able for these herbarium specimen sheet things for people able to choose one object detection model over another. For SimCLR, that's quite a widely used technique. So since then, there's also been so Dino is something. So a big thing in computer vision is, the great thing about large language models. Is that you can train it on all the because it's self-supervised, you can train on all the information that you can get in the digital age. So what's the equivalent in terms of computer vision? How can you come up with a self-supervised task for computer vision? And that's where you get SimCLR, and that's also where you get Dino. And they're both ways of being able to train a model on a huge amount of images that haven't been annotated. So that's the good. So what we use SimCLR in this model to be able to because we had a huge number of we took a huge number of bounding boxes around different characters, but lots of them weren't annotated. So that's why we could use SimCLR as a self-supervised way of learning to be able to train a model that had seen thousands and thousands and thousands of Greek characters, and then we could use that to train a classifier, and that's what gave us the good results.
So you didn't label manually?
We didn't label them manually, but what we did is we trained the model, a self-supervised model first, and then used that to fine-tune. Just like you might take a language model, train it on all the data that you can possibly get, and then suddenly those representations are really rich with information, and you can fine-tune that to whatever downstream task you want. So that's a great thing about Dino and SimCLR. You can train it on a huge number of images, and for Dino, they trained it on millions and millions of images, and they've released these pre-trained models, and so you can just take those and fine-tune them to be what you want, and then on a limited annotated data set, and that gives you great results straight away. So that's a lot of what I do. Could be in computer vision or in natural language processing. If you can take these big models with fantastic representations of your data already, and then I don't have the computational capacity to be able to train a big model like that, but what I can do is take something off the shelf and then fine tune it, and that's usually where you get the best results.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, that's great. So to summarize your project, the one with Greek copper, right?
Yeah.
What was like the hardest part? Was it the data pre-processing, model building, or basically at the end, what did you think the most difficult part was?
Yeah, it was the most difficult. I guess that was more just fun. I don't think there was I guess the challenge was to be able to and this came so after the competition, being able to pull it together to be able to come up with a useful it was easy to train a model to come up with the bounding boxes around the different characters, and then Evelyn trained the SimCLR model and the DIT model, and then it was a bit of a challenge to work out ways to combine them together. So we had to ensemble them, and we found we found a way to do it, but it seemed to work pretty well. But once we have that, how do we come up with a tool that's going to be useful for more than just winning the competition? How do we make it more useful for researchers who might want to use this information later on? And so we came up with a way of combining the letters and then combining and exporting that information in different formats so that researchers will be able to use that data set that we made to be able to search for text in the Oxyrhynchus papyri that we trained it on, that kind of thing. Not that we trained it on, that we predicted on. So we trained it on the data set that they gave us, but then we downloaded as many Oxyrhynchus papyri images as we could, and then we ran predictions on that, and we wanted that to be a useful tool. So I think packaging that up at the end, that was a challenge. So I hope people can use that data set. I'm hoping to use it for. I'm hoping to do more work in Greek papyri for using automated methods for dating. I think that was my original interest in this project, because I was really interested in, if I could get a bounding box around each of the different characters, can I come up with a model to just take a whole set of individual characters and then try to predict the age of the manuscript from each of those characters together. So that's
but you would be looking at this from like the standpoint of evolution of language?
Of handwriting, really. So there's a study called paleography.
Okay.
So most of the manuscripts we have from the ancient world, they're dated. If the scribe wrote a date on the manuscript, that's fantastic. Or sometimes we know that this manuscript had to have come from in the period of during the reign of a particular emperor or something like that. So sometimes we can date them those ways, but the main way that we date these ancient manuscripts is through their handwriting, through a study called paleography. And so you need to look at each of the different ways that each character is formed by the scribe to be able to work out, it was written like that in the 3rd century to the 5th century or something like that. And it's quite a challenging process, and it's often quite subjective. So you need to be able to take manuscripts that are dated and then compare them with manuscripts that aren't. And scholars will often disagree. But what I'm hoping to do is to come up with some kind of explainable AI tool to be able to say, okay, these letters look like those letters, and so we can, and with this kind of level of uncertainty, we can say that it's within this time frame, to be able to have another tool for people to be able to come up with manuscript ages, to be able to date them that way. So that was my original motivation. So I wanted to, and I'm hoping that the data set that Evelyn and I produced will be able to use for that, and also with my PhD student. He's now no longer a student; he's finished now, which is fantastic. We're hoping to work out. We came up with a model for how to model the distribution of number of characters per line in manuscripts. And so we're using the gamma count distribution, which is not a well-known distribution, but we think it works well. It's perfectly suited for this kind of problem. And so we want to use that data set to be able to show that that's an appropriate model for modeling the number of characters per line in any kind of text, particularly handwritten manuscripts. Anyway, so we're hoping that people can use that data set.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very interesting method. So with this method of studying the way that the word was written, how precise would your estimation of the age be?
Okay, a lot of it depends on the paleographer, the person who's doing it. So
I can imagine, because everyone has different style of writing.
That's right. And so it's so sometimes scholars have been quite bold. They say, it's within the first quarter of the 2nd century or something like that. And I think that's probably way too much precision. Often it's within a century, sometimes within 2 centuries. That's very standard. But even that might be too overly confident. Maybe we should be thinking you can only date these things precisely within 2 centuries. That's not my field of research, so I'll leave it to the experts. What I'm hoping to do is to come up with tools to be able to assist the experts. But I know over the last few years, there's been so my field of New Testament textual criticism, sort of studying the history of the transmission of the New Testament, that's sort of been rocked by people reevaluating the dating of these manuscripts. There were some manuscripts that we thought for certain were dated for this to the 2nd century, or maybe not the 2nd century, but the one manuscript I think the date usually given is between 175 and 225, and then that's so similar to another manuscript we have from the 4th century that we go, oh, look at this. So we have the text has hardly changed at all from the 2nd century to the 4th century, or from the turn of the 3rd century to the 4th century. This is and there's lots of conclusions that have been made from that. But what this scholar did was said, well, we can't be that precise for this papyrus manuscript. We need a much wider date range. That maybe that papyrus actually was produced at the same time as the later manuscript anyway, and they could have both been 4th century manuscripts, and that changes a whole lot of scholarship that's been based around this other manuscript being much earlier. So I think that we need more precise ways of being able to evaluate the evidence, and I'm not sure if we need new ways of doing it. I'm hoping that using machine learning is assisting human opinions by being able to look at be able to tabulate the lots of characters, rather than just saying this one looks like that. If you can be able to show it in the data and have lots of crop bounding boxes around all the letters, and be able to demonstrate how these letters are more like a 4th century one rather than the 3rd century one. I'm hoping that will be useful, but that's a work in progress. I've started working that, but I need to have more time to be able to do it. Okay. And that's that'll come in the future if I get more time to do my own research. Okay. So that's part of the challenge with this kind of job, is that what I'm paid to do is to collaborate with research across the university, and I love it. But you also have your own research agenda that you want to push forward. So if I can get, but the only way to do that is to get grants to pay for it. So I've got a grant at the moment to work 2 days a week in textual criticism, which is fantastic. So I'm finally able to get back into what I was doing, what I trained for, and if I'm successful with other grants, there'll be more time for looking at manuscripts.
Yeah, that's great. So this method that you are describing is basically saying that, for example, am I understanding this correctly? So our way of writing English words will be different in like 500 years, basically.
Yeah, or even less. Yeah. Okay.
So I can see differences. What's like the average period that you can see the changes?
Yeah, I think it changes generation by generation. So partly, like if a scribe, depends on how long a scribe will be. A scribe will be active. I think that's part of the reason why we need to have uncertainty. So if a scribe wrote early in their career and then late in their career, maybe their handwriting didn't change that much, but maybe their career spanned half a century. So I can see differences. I was taught to write differently to the way my kids are being taught to write, and then over 2 or 3 generations, it changes even more. Then I write completely different to my father. So you could see from my father's handwriting is a completely different generation to me, and then to my kids. So there's just in my lifetime, you can see this difference. But because my father was also writing at the same time period as my kids, so you can't. So if you found a sample of my father's writing, you could date that probably to the 20th or the 21st century without, because he would have been active in both those centuries. But it's very different to what you probably find in the 19th century. I'm not an expert in English handwriting in the modern era, so I don't really know. But it's you can see the types of changes that happen, and with Greek, you actually get very different types of scripts being introduced at different times. You have the early Greek majuscule script, and then that changes to, which is more like the Greek capitals, what we're familiar with, and then that changes to the minuscule script, which is more like what we think of as Greek lowercase letters. And then you can see that's a big shift that enabled scribes to write much more quickly and efficiently, and you can date things very. You can see that the one definitely came well before the other, and there's that's a big change, but lots of small changes that experts use to be able to identify which century. I've tried a little bit for Arabic, so I've worked a little bit in Arabic paleography, because that's more of my area than working with Greek manuscripts, and you can tell from the way Arabic letters were written that like you can. certain letters were joined different ways, or certain letters were formed different ways in the 9th century. That style of writing died out by the 10th century, and so you can tell which manuscripts are earlier than later. So you just need to be a little bit allow people to know that there is uncertainty inherent in these reconstructions and these estimates. So you just need to communicate that to people who come after you. Otherwise, they think it can be much more certain than what it is.
And now for the smooth follow-up, basically,
Sure.
because good thing that we talked about this, because now it will be great connection with tracing the evolution of biblical manuscripts.
Yeah, great.
The area that you've been researching quite a lot. So here I read your article, and what interested me the most is you described using biological methods that are also used in DNA analysis.
That's right.
So tools like phylogenetic analysis.
Exactly. That's right.
So that was for me very fascinating. It was like biology method in theology, basically, and in trying to detect the different canons of the Bible. So could you please describe these methods and especially phylogenetic analysis?
Yeah.
What is that and how is it used in your area?
Yeah, great. It might be helpful to think about how it first started being applied to text. So there's a scholar called Peter Robinson. He did his PhD on Old Norse poetry, and I hope I don't get the details wrong. But yeah, from what I remember, he did his PhD on Old Norse poetry. He spent years working out the relationship between the manuscripts. These two had a shared ancestor because they both have these same sort of errors, or these sorts of textual variants. And then this cluster of 5 manuscripts all must have come from a common ancestor. And this is the way traditionally textual critics have looked at a manuscript tradition, and so tried to put them in a family tree called a stemma. You can say, they're all, and you can see if they share common readings, and these common readings likely didn't arise independently. It means that they must have come from a common ancestor, or likely came from a common ancestor, and then so you can come up with this family tree, and that helps you reconstruct the text at the different points in its history. And if you can use that to come up with the earliest version, to reconstruct an earliest version of the text, or to see how the text evolved over time, and that's more of what I'm interested in, seeing what kinds of changes scribes made over time. How was the text received in certain areas compared to other places, and that kind of thing. So he did that for several years, and he thought he knew the tradition very well because he studied it very, very closely. And he encoded that information into some format and made it publicly available. And he had made a challenge. He posted, I think, on an early bulletin board or something like that to anybody to reconstruct on computational means, using a computational method, the family tree, the stemma that he made by hand. And he'd also used other information from the manuscripts, from other external evidence, so working out these manuscripts came from the same place and they're more likely together. But what he wanted to do is to just encode the text in some digital format and provide that to people. Could somebody use computational techniques to come up with it? And a bunch of people tried, and the most successful was a biologist who used phylogenetics, and in 5 minutes came up with a family tree, a stemma that was very close to what Peter Robinson had already had spent several years on. And so that was an amazing revelation at the time, and that they wrote a paper about it, and then they collaborated with other researchers from biology, working in bioinformatics, who used phylogenetics, and they came up with they applied it to Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and that became a Nature article, and that really brought about a lot of awareness of using this technique. So with phylogenetics, if you take let's say this was used quite a lot during COVID, right? During COVID, if they would sequence the RNA of the virus, and compare it with they compare the small little change. So each time the virus copies, it's going to change slightly, and so ones that were, if you can see the same changes across across sequences, then you can infer that they had a common ancestor. And there's different ways of doing phylogenetics. You can model the tradition. You can try to minimize the number of changes over time, and then you can come up with a family tree that way, or you can try to model it probabilistically that that it's more likely than not that each position that is going to it's going to stay the same, but there's some probability that it's going to change to a different nucleotide, that kind of thing. And that's what biologists have done for many decades, applying that to DNA sequences, also applying it to just using other types of traits in evolution, to looking at so if you can look at if there are certain features that evolved over time, you could say, that are unlikely to evolve independently. You can see that you work out a family tree that way, even without using DNA sequences. But that's more of what I'm familiar with, using a DNA sequence or using a protein sequence to be able to come up with a family tree that way. So they had biologists working together with textual scholars to be able to apply this method. That it could be applied to any text. And then New Testament scholars got interested. They collaborated with Peter Robinson and the other biologists that he was working with. And they started working on New Testament texts. And then my friend Stephen Carlson, I think he was a lawyer at the time. He'd already started work in biblical scholarship, finding that a particular biblical manuscript was actually a forgery. It was a hoax by a scholar who had this propensity to for these kinds of things. And I remember during my PhD, I was reading scholarship that was based on that manuscript being genuine, but he came up with the definitive proof that it was, or the definitive argument to say that it was a forgery. He did that while he was a lawyer. I think he used his lawyering skills for that. But while he was still working as a lawyer, he came up with his own software for doing phylogenetics and applying it to biblical texts. And he came up with a new way of doing it that allowed for different branches to be able to combine together. Because that's one of the things with New Testament. You don't just have... it's very easy to model the tradition as one manuscript being copied and then creating one new one. But the challenge is if you have a scribe that wants to bring two manuscripts together and take some versions from one, some versions from the other, or some variants from the other, and that really challenges the way. That's really challenging for how to model. And he came up with a way of doing it, and that was brilliant. So when I started my PhD, I read his work, and I thought it was brilliant. I wasn't aware of anything like that, but it totally suited me because I was really interested in coming from a computational, I'd worked as a research software engineer. I really wanted to have a computational side to my PhD, and it looked like what he came up with was absolutely brilliant. So I tried to take that and apply and used other techniques from bioinformatics. So he used the method where you're just trying to minimize the number of changes across the tree. I used the more probabilistic method that's used in more modern bioinformatics. So I was trying to take what he'd already done and take it to the next step. And we've been able to collaborate together. And then since then, Joey, who was one of the authors of that paper that you mentioned, he's been able to take that method and take it the next step further. That's hopefully over time we can work out these methods that are going to adequately model what's going on in the tradition. That's going to be able to bring out a whole lot of insights. Mm-hmm. So I think hopefully that answered your question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it did. It's a very interesting and very deep topic, like the different canons of New Testament. Mm-hmm. I remember listening to a podcast about this, and I didn't know that the kind of understanding of the Bible have been changing so much. Mm-hmm. And so let me ask you this. So today's translation and the Bible that we are reading today, that you can buy in a store, mm-hmm. How would you say how similar it is to the original version?
Great
written
question.
Over 2,000 years ago, right?
Yeah, I think it's very close. I think we've had but we can't know for certain. So I think over the last 100 years or so, since the early 1880s, the text is there was a definitive version of the New Testament that came out in 1881 that didn't use too much evidence, nowhere near as much evidence as what we have available to us today. But the editors of that edition, were able to explain and articulate exactly in great detail how the New Testament evolved over time, and that their arguments things have progressed since then. But a lot of what they've said has held up as being more or less correct, or more or less the best that we can do. So what we've so since that edition of the New Testament, not much has changed. Things have changed in the sort of academic version of the Bible. It's interesting from my point of view as a textual critic. I'm very interested in the small changes for words, but they might not even come across in English translation. So it really doesn't matter too much. So some things there's some big changes, like there's the start of Mark's gospel, whereas the beginning, in most Bibles you have the phrase, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, Son of God. Now, most manuscripts have Son of God, and a handful of them omit Son of God. And you think, how could a scribe at the start of the book have dropped out the word Son of God, since it was such an important part of the title of the book? So some scholars have said, it's more likely that it was originally missing and then it was added later rather than it dropping out. And scholars still argue that point, and it's probably divided between New Testament critics which one they prefer on that one. So those sorts of places, there's some places like that where it's uncertain, but it really doesn't change the message. So for that example of Mark, I would probably assume I'd be on the side of it's probably not original, but that doesn't mean that the author of the gospel didn't use the title Son of God, because that's one of the most important titles in the gospel overall. It does change the way you read the introduction, but not the message that you get from the overall book. So a good way of think about it, if you picked up a King James version of the Bible, or maybe a New King James version of the Bible, that's one end of the spectrum. That's based on what we call the majority text, the Byzantine text. So that's the Greek version that came out by Erasmus around the time of the Reformation. So he was using manuscripts that were available at the time, and those were all late Byzantine manuscripts, and they all have a very similar style of text. There's that, but on the other hand, we get we've got lots of the earliest manuscripts coming from Egypt, like the papyri that we were talking about before. Lots of these early ones that has a different kind of text, and what scholars call the Alexandrian text, or at least what we used to call the Alexandrian text type. And so modern Bibles are more based on those than what you get in the later Byzantine Empire. But if you look at the difference between a King James version of the Bible, besides just the translation and the language, if you just look at the textual variants, it's very much the same story you get, the same picture, the same overall idea. That it's just minor changes, and that you see them in the footnotes anyway. So I think we can be very confident that what we have is substantially the same, but there's enough room for scholars like me to be able to be very interested in these small changes.
Okay, so we shouldn't be expecting like a big paradigm shift with now that AI is
that's
used
right.
for reading those texts and
that's right. So I don't think it'll no big paradigm shifts, but we'll be able to shed more light on how I'm really interested in seeing how the text changed over time, what kind of changes the scribes made, what kinds of what kind of text that we find in Palestine in the 8th to the 12th century, what kind of text do we find in different places around the world, and how quickly did it change, what motivated a scribe to change. I'm more interested in that sort of transmission history, but I don't think we're going to change too much what was at the initial text. Our best estimate of what was the initial text.
Yeah, and exactly, how do you think like those changes were made and why? Was it like mostly just translating, and with translation, I don't know, maybe some meaning was lost and new meaning was added, or with the cultural shift, whatever, someone decided that this type of I don't know, this type of meaning of the Bible would be more appropriate for that time of age?
Yeah, great question. That's sort of what we're trying to demonstrate with the phylogenetics. So one of the things that I've been working on with also a PhD student Joey, who's just finished, is so rather than just treating each reading as weighing the same amount or costing the same amount to change from one to another, we try to think, we classify the types of changes between one reading to another, and then see and allow each of these categories to have different rates in the model. So you can see how often does it happen that scribes just change a word just based on the orthography or just the spelling of the word. How often does the spelling change? How often do you to get spelling errors? How often do you get just shifts in grammar but the word stays the same? How often do you get synonyms being substituted in? How often do you get it you get harmonization between another passage that might be in another book of the Bible? How much is that copied into this one? And so we can estimate if you encode all those categories to all the readings, and you run the phylogenetic model, you can see how you can estimate the rates, how likely it was, how quickly these sort of changes are introduced. And you can see that these changes in meaning. So for my PhD, I used far fewer categories than what Joey's more recently done. So his work's more advanced than mine. But I found that changes in meaning happen far less frequently than just these orthographic changes. It's exactly like you'd expect, but this is a way to quantify it. That big changes in meaning happen very rarely, but small changes just during making a mistake from the I, you might just see one word. If it's very similar to another word, you could change it, and then it's these sort of easy mistakes to make happen far more frequently. And we're trying to find ways of quantifying that, and that helps us understand the whole tradition. So I think most of the time scribes try to copy exactly what their exemplar, what they were copying from. They tried to copy it as faithfully as they could. Sometimes they, as in the Arabic tradition, I'm working mainly in translations. So sometimes the earlier translations had mistakes in the grammar, because the classical Arabic wasn't well known in the early periods of that I was looking at, and later periods it might have been embarrassing for there to be grammatical mistakes in the translation that they were using. So those things were corrected, and sometimes these translations are overhauled completely. They might go back and look at the Greek and try to reevaluate what the text means and come up with a totally new translation that's based on the old one but it's very new. So those are the kinds of things that I look at. Those things happen rarely, but they make a big impact when they happen in the textual transmission. So you need to find ways of seeing where that happened and being able to study it. And that's what's interesting.
It's very fascinating. Sorry, but we are running out of time, so
sorry, I've been
I'm going
talking too long.
To wrap up.
Yeah, go for it.
Basically, I wanted to ask you, and this is kind of a broad question. I don't know if it's not a little bit too simplistic, but when I was reading your paper, and in general, when I was, reading about how AI is used to decode those ancient manuscripts, a question popped in my mind. Is it possible that because we didn't have those new methods that we are using today, we have very wrong understanding of some part of history, and with AI we could see like a big paradigm shift. Now that we can decode this text, suddenly this historical fact that we know of today will be completely different. Do you think that that's possible?
Yeah, it's a good question, and those are really exciting if you're working in a discipline where you get to come out with a paradigm shift and be able to change the way things are working. I don't think I've been involved in something as dramatic as that in my short career so far. I think a lot of what I've been doing is trying to find new, sort of more methodological paradigm shifts to be able to change the way we work with data. So I think that's more where the advances that I see myself contributing to, while open to the idea of, and partly this just confirms previously held beliefs, like what I was saying about Westcott and Hort before. A lot of so one of the things that Joey's PhD did was just confirm that this the views of Westcott and Hort from the 1880s was basically what was being confirmed by these new methodologies. So I think that's still an advance, even if we're not changing our opinion that much. If we're much more, if we've got new methods that showing that what we previously thought was already correct, I think that's valuable academic work. But I think there's so many opportunities for doing new areas of study, and that's going to bring about new knowledge and new ways of exploring the knowledge that we have. I think it's a tremendously exciting time to be doing science at the moment. There's so many different avenues. There's so much low-hanging fruit to be had, and it's going to bring about incredible changes the way we think about the past. It's going to be incredible changes about how much information individual scholar is going to be able to process. You think about how much a scholar can actually. We're giving scholars superpowers by being able to opening up a world of information that they wouldn't have been able to synthesize or even be able to read in the past. So I'm hoping that by working in collaboration with people who are already experts, being able to find new ways of exploring these sorts of things, we're going to be able to bring progress in all these sorts of areas. And that might bring about the kinds of shifts that you're thinking about. It might bring more modest ones, but I think either way, as long as we're doing good science, then those are advances to be celebrated.
Yeah, that's great. And lastly, how does one get into this area of research? I understand that you are running, you have PhD students, right?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I've had I've got a few students myself. We also the Melbourne Data Analytics platform, we also have an internship program, which is fantastic. I've worked with lots of interns over the years. So interns come from science, come from Master of Data Science, from IT, even from arts. So at the University of Melbourne, people can work with us for a semester on different projects. Then you get a supervisor who's one of the people on my team. They'll help work with you on a real research project with academics at the university. You'll make real contribution to a particular topic, and you get to explore different ways of doing data science in the real world, or at least in the academia, maybe not the real world. I think that's a great program. And that's one way forward. I think working with, if you're interested in the academic side of applying data science, you could work out ways to be a research assistant for academics at the university. You could approach, or you could do a research project that's using your data science background and applying it in a particular area. That would be a great way forward. I think so please, if you're interested, contact the Melbourne Data Analytics platform. Contact me, and I think there's lots of ways that academia can benefit from the kinds of skills that data science students are learning, and I think academics need to partner with students like you.
Yeah, okay. Well, this has been a great conversation from biology, ancient history, reading ancient scripts with data science to, so thank you very much, basically.
Thanks very
fascinating.
much.
And to our listeners, you can check out so it's professor, it's doctor.
Yeah,
Rob.
Doctor. You can call me Rob, but you can. So if you look at, so I got all papers up on robturnbull.com.
Yeah.
That's where you can see, or the university's Find an Expert page.
This is what I used.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Robert, and till the next time.
Thank you very much. I wish you all the best with the podcast. Thank you.
Okay, that was amazing.